Good evening. You're watching The Digital Age, and I'm James Goodale. Will the net swallow up cable? The net has swallowed up the music business. It looks like it's swallowing up the newspaper business. And by the way, is that the reason Comcast is buying NBC to protect itself from being swallowed up by the net? Those are the questions for us tonight. And we're pleased to have Craig Moffett, who is the Vice President and Senior Analyst of Sanford Bernstein, the acknowledged expert, I would think, in this field. Anyone who can get a copy of his reports should. It'll cost you a mint, but they are the gold standard of all analyst reports. They're just absolutely fantastic.
Kind of you to say, thank you.
Okay, so now we want to get into this business where people say they don't want to watch cable television through a cable connection anymore. They say to themselves, you know, to heck with the cable. What I'll do is I'll cut the cable and I'll just watch all my TV on the net. Why do I have to pay twice? I'm already paying for the internet connection. Why do I have to pay for the cable connection? And look, you know, I'm on the net all the time watching TV. You know, you get your little snapshots in the news programs. You've got Hulu, and you've got YouTube. I mean, if they can do it for them, why can't they do it for everything? I'm going to get rid of my cable connection. So the first question I want to ask you is, and I should say also, and they watch this on their TV screen, by the way.
Right.
Okay. So first question I want to ask you is, do you watch your internet reception on TV?
Do I personally?
Yeah.
I have. I don't regularly, but I have. As an analyst in the sector, I suppose I have to try all of those things. And look, it works. It works pretty well. The impediment to this isn't going to be that the technology won't get you there, because the technology will get you there. The problem is the economics, and
economics,
as it always is. And look, what you described, this kind of great nirvana, can be boiled down in a very simple way to not a forecast, but a wish. And that wish is really simple. That wish is, I wish my TV was free, right?
Is that what the wish is? I wish my TV is free. I guess that's right. So you say to yourself, I want to cut the cord. I'm going to save that money, so I'll get it free. Is that the only factor?
Well, I mean, think of your cable for a minute as two different things. Your cable is both the physical access, that is the pipe into your home, coaxial cable as the connection medium. And then it's also the intellectual property, the bundle of content that, in effect, cable operators in the old days used to describe themselves as essentially wholesale clubs. They would buy content at wholesale from people like Disney and Viacom, and then they would repackage it together and sell it back at retail to consumers. When people say, I would love to cut the cord, there are all kinds of things they could say. Boy, I wish I had more choices. I wish I could find old, obsolete Hungarian dance films. I wish that I could watch it whenever I wanted and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well,
but mostly what they really talk about is, gee, I wish it was free. And why should I, you put it yourself, why should I pay twice for the content? I'm paying once for the cable pipe, and so, but that is a wish that has very little to do with your cable operator and everything to do with this perception.
What you can see.
The content, that's right. With the content, with the perception that, well, the content ought to be free, and unfortunately, guess what? It won't be.
I wonder if we just take a step backwards for a sec, for people who are sitting out there wondering how they do this. Now, I have to confess to you, I teach law school. And the students are more or less my age, but they may be a few years younger. And I'm surprised at the number of law students that I have. I would say, 20% of my students have cut the cable. And then they're going on directly. And I don't think they all have a cable connection which carries both the internet and cable. We have to be clear that what we're talking about is when all this stuff comes into the home, it's coming on the same.
All coming in on the same.
Coming on the same
wire.
apparatus. You know, you say it's easy enough to do. That's what you said.
Well, it's not.
Well, how do you do it? How do you do it? How do you do it anyway?
The easiest ways are typically through third-party boxes. For example, there are people like Roku or even Apple TV that provide both a blended access to the internet that also connects to the television. Comes in via IP or internet protocol and then is translated back into a standard that your TV can understand.
So you got to buy a box, basically.
So typically you have to buy a box. Now you can do it yourself, and you can effectively run it through the processor of your laptop, and you can run it out your laptop and into or out of your desktop and into your television.
What do you need a box for that?
Well, your computer will have a processor in it that can both input and output typically. The problem is it then becomes the very tactical and simplistic problem of, well, wait a second, my cable modem is in the living room, and I keep the cable, the connection that comes into the back of the television, I want to run into the dining room, and you run into those kind of simple logistics. You can do it wirelessly. It tends to be sort of bulky and difficult to do wirelessly and takes a fair amount of technical know-how. It's a little harder than just saying I can set up a Wi-Fi network in my house. But if you have some level of technical proficiency, you can usually solve the problem of how do I get content from my television set, or from my internet connection onto my television set.
It's not that hard, is what you're telling me.
It's not that hard. The harder part is, and now let's make an important distinction. The harder part is how do I legally get the content into my computer, and legally is the operative word.
Really, is there a legal problem?
a little bit of
I'm a lawyer.
Issue, right?
Can I tell you what I do before you tell me
Sure,
what my legal problem
yeah.
is? Well, of course, I hire somebody because I'm a plutocrat. I've got a huge 46-inch, 48-inch screen, okay, and I can put the internet. Let me see what I do. I go to the net, okay. This is what I like to do, particularly the sports, some of the crazy oddball sports games, okay? So I've got this huge screen. I go to the internet. I go to the provider of the sports program, which, by the way, is a provider who does not otherwise provide.
That's right.
Okay,
Yep.
So it's unique programming. So I've got a game on, and you would think if you're, a novice at this, that you get a little picture the size, like this. Well, most people know this, but I'll say anyway. You click in the corner, and wimbo bango, I've got this oddball sports game that's filling my screen. It doesn't. There's no logistical problem. I've got my computer right there, so I'm pretty happy with that.
And that's great if the content that you're trying to get is relatively obscure, and there's no one here that owns the rights to it and is fighting for it. But let's take a step back for a second and think about the economics of the players in the value chain here. Most people tend to think about the economics of the cable provider. I think you phrased it yourself in the title of tonight's show, which is it's about your cable. But let's back up a step further than that to the content owners and the networks. Let's take Disney or Viacom or Fox or any one of the others. Their cable networks, which now represent some 65% of all viewing hours in the United States, their cable networks get two revenue streams. They sell advertising, but they also get paid by the cable operator for carriage. And particularly because of the recession, the carriage fees that they get are getting to be a larger and larger share of the total economic pie for these guys. That is to say, they're much more dependent on carriage fees than they ever were before. That inconvenient fact seems to get ignored when most people talk about, well, wouldn't it be great to get it all over the internet? Because what most people are talking about when they say get it over the internet is, I'm assuming that I can just go to the website and watch it for free. Well, that's not going to be the case. There's a reason why you won't find most cable programming, that is the cable networks. Again, nothing to do with the Comcasts and the Time Warner cables and the Charters and the Coxes of the world. Just the cable networks, the FX and the Sci-Fi and
HBO.
HBO is another example. USA Network. All of those cable networks, you typically won't find their content available for free on the web because their business model depends on getting paid for producing it. go upstream one step further, and the actors and the artists and the screenwriters and the lighting people and the makeup people all need to get paid. And the advertising stream just doesn't cut the mustard as how you support the economics of making this content. And so you have to divorce yourself from the idea that, well, why shouldn't I just pay a broadband fee for access to the internet, and then everything that I get over the internet is going to be free, because it won't be.
Okay, but how about this? Why don't you say, I don't like to mess with my DVR. I'm at a certain stage in life where I don't want to mess with my DVR. It'd be much easier for me if I got that programming that would be on the DVR to have it on the net, because I don't have to fool around with the DVR. All I do is go to the net and I'll pay.
That's right, and it may turn out to be that way. Now,
what does that do to your thesis?
Well, it depends what the model is, right? There are all different models that are possible. Today, the model that you get in cable TV is I pay one price per month, and I don't pay any more regardless of how much I watch. Now, that's so obvious and it's so deeply ingrained in all of us that we forget that that's actually a sort of unusual model. If I go back just 10 years ago, it used to be that the average American household watched, or the average American person watched about 4 hours a day of television. Through the 2000s, between 2000 and the end of 2009, through that whole decade, we saw this massive growth in the amount of time that people spend on the internet. We saw this massive growth in the amount of time that people spend on wireless phones and using their wireless devices for communication and entertainment. We saw birth of video on the internet and this massive growth of things like YouTube. By the end of the decade, people weren't spending 4 hours a day watching television on their regular television sets anymore. They were spending 5.
What? It went up? Well, I was going to say, there were going to be one. What, it went up?
It went up.
It went up even though they got more options to watch on the net? The amount of television goes up?
The amount of television has risen, and in fact, since the recession started just in the last couple of years, it's gone up even faster. In fact, here's an interesting statistic for you. You can go back to 1999, and the growth in internet consumption and computer consumption on a percentage growth rate has been much, much faster, very, very rapid. But the increase in the number of hours of television viewing has been at least twice the increase in the number of hours of browsing the internet and computer-based entertainment.
Well, how about just comparing what you said to the amount of time that I'm watching TV on the net? Because everyone watches TV on the net because they watch YouTube, they watch...
And they click on links in their email, and they watch the squirrel and
Hulu,
and they watch the laughing baby or a picture of
so
their
that must
grandchild.
Geez, I can't believe TV's going... What kind of country you got so many people on television? But...
well, we watch a lot of television. We watch more television than we do have working hours as a society by quite a lot.
More than working hours?
More than working hours. More than sleeping hours, actually.
More than sleeping hours?
Now, but here's a very interesting study. The folks at Nielsen, who are the ones who measure television, really wanted to get to the bottom of how much internet consumption internet video we actually watch. And so they did a fascinating study with Ball State University where instead of just asking people how much video do you watch on the net, they actually monitored people, an entire community they monitored for a couple of days and measured what this community did in 10-second intervals of all different age groups, all different ethnicities, all different life situations, whether it's employed, unemployed, student, retiree, you name it. All of the different cross sections, and they watched what people actually did. Two interesting takeaways. First of all, the amount of television that people watch is much greater even than what they think they watch. So people significantly underreport the amount of television that they watch. Secondly, people massively overestimate the amount of television or video they watch over the internet, to the tune of 3 to 4 times, where they will watch about a 3.5-minute video clip and they will say, I watched 15 minutes of video on the web. And so if you actually look at how much, in terms of real empirical measurement, how much time people spend consuming video on the internet, It is a de minimis fraction of the amount of time that they spend watching television on average. Now, that doesn't mean that won't change, and it doesn't mean that the internet isn't consuming more and more and more of our waking hours in video. And over the next 10 years, you may see a very different story that says that we now maybe watch a meaningful portion of our video over the internet instead of over traditional cable pipes. But we're a long way away from that today.
Well, that's an interesting statistic. So we were at 4 hours, and now we're more, you say, for TV.
Yeah.
But what is the actual number of hours that we watch the video on the net?
It's
a day.
I may get this wrong, but it's a little bit more than 3 minutes, I think.
3 minutes? Oh, come
That's
on,
right.
that can't be right.
That is the number.
But I watched 3 hours on Saturday. Where am I in the statistics?
You may be now. There's a wide range, but interestingly, it's not all the stereotypes that you would think, which are, well, none of this really applies to people who are between 15 and 25 because everybody knows that they watch video on the internet all the time. Not really all that different, it turns out, from people that are 25 to 34 and from people that are 34 to 54 and what have you. A lot of the preconceived notions that we have about the way people consume video and the way people consume media in general were overturned by this Ball State study, which was really a fascinating piece of research and the first truly academic study of its kind into the topic.
Well, what's the future of this program on YouTube? This is a half-an-hour program, so I would say, based on your
well, remember,
report, there's no future because they're going to go.
No,
they're going to go for 3 minutes. They're going to go for 3 minutes, and they're out.
That at all. Although interestingly, the amount of time that people spend on the YouTube site, for example, really hasn't actually grown. It's still not 4 minutes yet, and it's been below 4 minutes for the last couple of years. And it really hasn't grown all that much. And I suspect that what you're going to find over the next few years is people sample more and more. There is more and more long-form content on the web. But I think there is this nirvana or this holy grail that people are looking for, that there's this crossover point at which I can get everything that I want and start watching video over the web. And unfortunately, that's very difficult. Now, one more thing I haven't mentioned, and for those of you, since I think your audience is a relatively technically savvy audience, interestingly, very few people think about the economics of web distribution, if I go one step back further in the chain, to the content owners and what are the network costs to the content owners. It's one thing if you're saying, I'm going to serve long-tail content and very few people actually watch this particular show, but when they do, I can provide a few servers and it's really interesting. If I start to think about the servers that it takes to provide a show that is popular, whether it's the NCAA basketball tournament or some of the things that you see served online, and eventually when I start to get to the really popular types of content, if I start to handle that on an ongoing basis, the cost of web hosting and transport, that is
it's quite expensive.
That's right, and I'm sure you know what it is just for your own show, what you have to pay for hosting the show and what have you. When you start to do it on a large scale, it becomes incredibly expensive. And your viewers, actually, there's an interesting article, blog posting from Mark Cuban, who, among other things, now the Dallas Mavericks owner and well-known billionaire, but before that was actually the founder, and his money comes from broadcast.com. He's one of the first guys that actually started doing video on the net. That's his business when it was sold to AOL is how he got his fortune. And he writes, I think, quite eloquently about if you're going to serve more than 1 million customers with your video stream, which, by the way, is a drop in the bucket compared to what we see for American Idol and things like that, then you better forget trying to do it with web-based distribution because it's just too expensive. It's better to rent a channel from DirecTV and Comcast because the economics of trying to provide it via web hosting and the traditional kinds of IP services is just simply unattractive.
So most viewers, short bursts. It's expensive. You're not going to get it for free. That raises a couple of questions in my mind. Does that tell us that the viewers' expectation of going online is for a short burst? And if that is so, and YouTube would prove that point, but how about Hulu? You can watch at Hulu, for those who don't know, you can watch regular entertainment programs from networks for free.
Mostly broadcast networks. Mostly broadcast networks.
Yeah, but
it's private. Remember, Hulu is owned by NBC and Fox, and now Disney has a different participation. But you can find content from ABC. You can find content from NBC, from CBS, Fox. What you can't find is you can't go and find all of the stuff that is cable networks, often owned by those same corporate parents. Because those corporate parents are saying, well, wait a second, I can't make these numbers work. And in fact, interestingly, Chase Carey, now CEO of Fox, said before Comcast ever got involved in NBC, that we have to put Hulu behind a paywall. The idea of giving away content for free on Hulu was already recognized to be a fool's errand. And again, it gets back to this premise that people assume that it's going to be free, but the economics simply don't support it. Even the broadcasters are now saying that just the advertising, because the ad loads that I get on when I watch some, now let me put myself into consumer shoes. I see fewer ads when I watch The Simpsons on Hulu than I do when I watch The Simpsons on Channel 5. That means that I better pay more, I better charge advertisers more for those ads. And unfortunately, not only do you have fewer ads, but they don't generate more income. So Fox is demonstrably better off having their television go through the old model than the new model, and they're starting, therefore, to change.
Okay, so I know we've got NBC in the picture here. I guess the answer to the question is this the reason that Comcast is buying NBC to, well, let me finish the question, to protect itself as a cable operator so that it has enough programming to put on, and it owns that programming. That's not the reason. What's the reason?
No, I think, and look, I've been a very vociferous critic of this, of the idea of trying to combine Comcast and NBC. I don't think the combination makes any economic sense.
Oh, you don't think it makes any sense?
But
really?
I can say fairly clearly that based on all of my conversations with Comcast and the executives at Comcast, that the notion of buying this as a defensive move to protect themselves from video moving onto the internet, contrary to all the conspiracy theories you read, had nothing to do with this. It's just it didn't register on their radar screen.
So why are they doing it?
These guys are smart guys. It's not like they've never heard of the theories and that they haven't given them serious thought. But that's not why they went out and bought NBC.
So why are they doing it?
Well, it's actually.
I mean, it's a very interesting transaction from a sort of a global point of view. I mean, here we have the networks that used to put the back of their hand for the cable companies. Now the cable companies,
it's the other way around.
I mean, it's not the other way around, and they're buying the big fella on the block because they're now the big fella on the block. So why? So why are they doing it?
Remember that for all of the talk, and Lord knows there's been a lot of talk of what time is Conan O'Brien going to be on, and is he going to leave NBC, or is he going to stay with NBC, and is he going to go to Fox or not go to Fox, and where's Jay Leno's slot going to be, and blah 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 blah. All that's fascinating chatter for the front page of the New York Post, but it has very little to do with the economics of NBC. NBC is about the USA Network, and it's about CNBC and MSNBC.
I see, about their cable networks.
The USA Network is a much bigger business. Now, it happens to be that you've got the NBC name on the door and you've got a picture of a peacock, and so people naturally think about the legacy of Johnny Carson, but that's not what drives the NBC business anymore. So, NBC is about cable networks.
So Comcast is just buying another cable company. Is that what's going on here?
It's buying cable networks. Again, you separate the cable company.
Cable networks. I didn't say cable company.
Comcast is a cable company.
They're
with
buying
pipes.
cable networks.
And the combination of pipes and content, in theory, could be interesting. Time Warner tried it for a long time. Remember, Time Warner Corporation, which owns Turner Broadcasting and therefore TNT and TBS and CNN, also happened to be the owner of Time Warner Cable, which is the second largest cable operator in the United States. They owned those two things under the same roof for years, and there was almost no attempt whatsoever to try to extract any synergies, as they would refer to them, out of that. They didn't run them as the same business.
Well, speaking of cable and what cable companies do and how content comes around. I wonder if there's one big hole in your theory. It goes like this. There was a time when cable started where everyone said it's just to use a phrase of a famous author, a dumb pipe, that's your phrase, because at that point in time it was just carrying somebody else's work. And they couldn't ever create their own material. They couldn't participate in that creation. Why can't I go out on the net and do what's happening at cable and be my own?
Well, you can make your own
And so
content.
why won't everyone come and see me and they'll just bypass
Well,
cable?
here's the problem.
Have to be a short answers. We run out of time.
There's 5 companies, Disney and Fox and Time Warner and News Corp and NBC, that control 85% of the viewing hours. Good luck if you want to make another company that's going to unseat them. But this is not for Comcast.
Take a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. This is not for Comcast and for Time Warner Cable to dictate. This is going to be driven by Disney and Fox and the companies that own content.
So, will the net swallow up cable the way it swallowed up the music business, newspapers? Yes or no?
No. Sad to say, no.
Thanks for coming by, Craig
Nice
Moffett.
to see you.
And thank you for coming by. And come by next week and learn more about the digital age. For the digital age, I am James Goodale, and have a good week. Good night.